You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. So great to be with you all again. Well, we're going to fly around the universe today, as usual, with another galactic ambassador from down under, Eesha Patel. Welcome, Eesha.
Thank you, Karen. It's so nice to be here.
Sorry, I'm just hearing myself in my ears on another platform. Okay, so Eesha is in Perth on the other side of the country to me. It's a big place, Australia. So it's like from New York to LA, isn't it? From Sydney to Perth.
Yes.
It takes about 5 hours to fly in the plane to get there.
It's actually closer for me to get to Bali than it is for me to get to you.
Absolutely. And there's Shirley. Hello, Shirley. Thanks for tuning in as usual. I love Shirley, one of our biggest friends. So let me tell you a little bit about Eesha, and we're going to hear more about her story. So Eesha Patel had some supernatural experiences when she was a young child, sensing ghosts in her house around the age of 12. And in her mid-20s, she had a profound contact experience, which led to a spiritual awakening. This set her on a journey of exploring consciousness, which quickly shifted her life into a new and unknown direction of spirituality and entrepreneurship. Her vision is to have peaceful, open contact with our Star Nation neighbors by 2027, which is not far away. That's a nice vision. I like that vision. Eesha specializes in the field of galactic consciousness and knows she's here to facilitate the connections between humans and our galactic family. Through her powerful interdimensional connections, Eesha lends her services of activation and channeling to assist others in bringing through powerful visionary tools, techniques, and technologies for healing and our greater evolution. Her mission is to contribute to this global awakening through her work. Wow. So you're doing great jobs. You were overseas recently at a conference in the US, weren't you? A ufology conference. What was that like?
Traveling most of the year, actually. So I find that in the US there's a lot of events, more so than, as you know, in Australia than what we have. So so actually the recent one I went to was Contact in the Desert, and that I think is actually the world's biggest ufology conference. And prior to that, I was at the one in Sedona, which is the Sedona Ascension Retreat. And again, you'll find some really incredible people attending those sorts of events. So it's been a wonderful opportunity traveling around the globe and really connecting with others in the space as well.
Yeah, I agree. Australia doesn't have quite the same enthusiasm for the contact ufology ET conversation, but it's getting there. Like 25, 30 years ago, I was up in Byron Bay hanging out with all the people that said they were from other planets. So there's plenty of us here, but it's just that organization, getting us together and talking about it in a way that's cohesive and can speak to the mainstream mind too. So let's go back to your childhood. What was happening when you were a kid?
So when I was about maybe 12 years old, I remember this house that we lived in. I had this sense that there was spirits around, and as a kid, I didn't really know that much about it, but it was enough for me to sort of question and go, okay, maybe there's something else out there. And there was this one particular experience I had with this woman, a ghostly woman that I'd find standing at the edge of my bed. And I would just see her, and she never came in the room. She just stood near the doorway at the foot of the bed and just made her presence known. And so I would see her there, and every once in a while I could hear footsteps in the kitchen late at night or early hours in the morning. to the point where it did scare me. And I remember many times saying to my mom, oh, I wish my brother would sleep in my room. So we would pull his mattress in and get him sleeping in my bedroom because I didn't want to be alone. So anyway, eventually after, having these experiences and talking about them with the family, they decided to get an Indian priest to come in and do a clearing ceremony. So we call them a Bandaji. A Bandaji is like a Hindu priest that you get from the temple, and they come in and they can help cleanse the space. And so the Bandaji comes to our house and he does this whole ceremony. And then one of the methods that they use is they use lemons in India. You'll see them if you ever go to India. You'll find lemons on the street outside doors. And so if you ever see that, now you know what that is. It's one of the ways that they take the spirits and they bind them inside the lemon with the intention that it just cleanses all that negative energy away. So the Panditji came, he did this lemon ceremony. He took a small lemon, wrapped it in a piece of string, and then put it in a bucket of water. And then he instructed my parents to then take that bucket of water and the lemon and dispose it in the ocean the next day. So the next morning rolls around and the lemon has mysteriously disappeared. But the string is sitting intact in a ball shape, floating on this water with nothing inside it. And then the Bandaji rings my dad and says, hey, where's the lemon? It's gone. So he knew somehow what had happened, even though we hadn't told him. And then he said to us just, the spirit has actually taken the lemon with it and escaped, but it's left your home. So he said, just go to the ocean, tip out whatever's left, and you should be done with it. So that was one of the first experiences I had when I was so young that I didn't fully understand it at the time, but it made me realize that there's more to this reality in the sense that the physical world isn't the only thing that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Wendy, she says hi all. So when you're a kid, it's interesting. I go back to the movie The Sixth Sense. I love that movie. I watched it again recently, and here's Michelle. Hi, Michelle. And, like the little kid was really scared, and then he realized that they were just, spirits asking for help. I wonder, with all this thing, what did you call the guy that came to help you? The Abundaji? How does it go?
Panditji. It's a Hindu priest.
A Hindu priest. I wonder if he asked, like, who it is. Like, hello, who are you? Can we help you? Like, people often think that sensing presences in the house, it always has to be some evil or demonic sort of thing. We need to get rid of it. Rather, it could be grandma trying to say hello. Yeah, I wonder. Did you feel scared when you felt it as a kid, or?
There was actually more than one spirit present, and that particular one that he cleansed was not a nice one, and I think we felt it. But that old lady that just stood at the end of my bed, I think she was pretty harmless. I think she just needed to go home. So yeah, you get all sorts. I mean, since then I've done quite a lot of space clearing in my time, and later I started my studio. I had a physical, like, brick and mortar studio space that I held for many years in Perth. And some of the clearings that I did there were really just spirits wanting to go home. So you can get all sorts, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's Rachel. Hi, Rachel. I watched last night, I revisited a really old movie with Nicole Kidman called The Others. Have you ever seen that? When was it made? I think 2002.
Ooh, I think so. No,
and
I don't know
it's about a woman in a house with her two children. And anyway, spoiler alert is that she's actually dead and she doesn't know she was dead. And I remember watching it over 20 years ago thinking, how could you not know you're dead? But having spoken to many people that speak with spirit and spoken to many spirits myself, it's amazing how many people do die and don't realize they're dead or feel attached to a place. I mean, in the movie The Others, she's attached to the house and she doesn't want to leave the house. Yeah, it's really interesting. So what happened when you were in your mid-20s?
So in my 20s, I was going through, some people would call it dark night of the soul. I'm not a big fan of labels on all of this, but essentially I was going through a difficult period in my life. And for me, what that looked like was coming out of a relationship that I'd really been quite committed to and thought that this was my future. And so coming out of that felt very sudden, very abrasive. It was quite an emotionally um, difficult experience. And so on the back end of that, that's actually where my spiritual awakening really started. Now, I just want to backtrack a little bit before that, because a lot of people ask me at this point, but did you have any background, or was there anything that sort of led to this? And so in my early 20s, because of some of these supernatural experiences that I was having, I actually reached out to somebody in my community who said to me that they could mentor me. And so this person actually showed me how to do a Merkaba light body activation. And through that technique, I started opening up my energy channels. Now, the reason why I started it was because I thought that I'd be able to protect myself and look after my energy field a bit better, because I was very sensitive. I used to have other strange experiences in my mid-teenage years, for example, around the age of 16, or maybe even earlier. As soon as I hit those teenage years, I would have these really weird experiences with lights. So I would touch a light, it would just blow, or I would walk under a lamp in the street and it would either go on or go off, So like weird stuff would start happening to the point where it was noticeable. And I remember jumping on the internet and thinking, like, what is this phenomena with lights? Why am I, interfering or interacting with lights in this way? And found out that I wasn't the only one. So when I told this to this lady, she said, well, you're ungrounded. I can teach you some techniques to help you ground yourself and protect your energy. So when she taught me how to activate my Merkaba light body, at that point in time, the intention was more around protection. What I didn't know that it was going to do was around this expansion of my energy field. And so I was doing that practice for about a year and a half or so before I had this experience of going through this big shift in my life. And I have to say, I think it was because I had that prep work in place that when this transition in life happened for me, I was ready for it. And so literally overnight, I had this awakening experience where my energy field shifted so dramatically that I literally woke up the next morning and it was like the sounds were louder, the colors were brighter. It was a very tangible shift. And at the same time, I remember having this really weird feeling like I was a new person, but my life was the same. Same parents. I woke up in the same house. The same person was next to me. Everything was the same. And yet I was such a different person that woke up this morning that I couldn't explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds a bit like you had a walk-in experience, like an aspect walked in. It's very much what that sounds like. I've had that experience as well through a healing, actually, with another galactic guy that came out to Australia from the States. Yeah, walked out into this ugly little street in the, middle of Sydney, and it looked so bright and beautiful to me. Like the wires of the electricity were like, oh, that's amazing. All this stuff that was really mundane looked so amazing. Yeah, it's interesting. But I can't say that I was a different person, but another aspect joined me in this. Yeah, or I just cleared away enough dross for more of me to join me. I don't know how it all works, but
well, they did explain this to me later on down the track, because I've asked about this many times, what actually happened that night, because it was so dramatic. And
so when you say they, you're talking about your guides, your spirit guides,
the galactic guides. Yeah.
What did they say to you?
Yeah. So what the galactic beings told me was, they said, look, because I questioned this many times. I said, am I a walk-in? Because the events that unfolded after that was so dramatically shifting. And I can talk about some of what happened shortly in a moment. But in that actual moment, the explanation that I've been given from my guides is that it was more of my higher self stepping in. And I remember that moment so clearly. So what actually happened the night before was I turned around to the person that I was with and I just said, look, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so that kickstarted the dissolution of the relationship. But in the moment, I really felt like it wasn't me. It wasn't, like, the words weren't coming out of my mouth. So when I've looked back on it since then and tried to make sense of what happened, I realized that it was a deeper embodiment of higher self. And as you mentioned, Karen, a soul aspect stepped in during that moment. And when the words came out of my mouth, it was coming in through that higher aspect. So for me, it was the experience of it was this like really sudden expansion to the point where I did actually feel like, am I a walk-in? Is this a new me? Is something else stepping inside of me? But then I realized actually it's just more of myself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, has said the same thing about channeling Abraham, that what she calls Abraham is just a part of her higher self. Yeah, oversoul, stream of consciousness. And
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. And then she expands to be more her than she is when she's in her human personality. And then and because I remember hearing that in 2004, I went on a cruise with the Abraham people. And yeah, the question was, how does she do this channeling thing? Like, how does all this work? And that was one of the things that she said. She always says in the conferences, and you might know this too, and I know this too, that whenever I go to speak to crowds, I know that everyone's question will be answered through what I say. They don't even have to put up their hands. And interesting enough, in Australian crowds, when it comes to question time, I always say, has anyone got any questions? No one's got questions. And that's what she said. Your question will be answered. You might not get in the hot seat, but your question will be answered. So hopefully people's questions will be answered today through our conversation. Yeah. And so it was a contact experience. What did it feel like for you, and what did they say to you, and how did they identify? How did your galactic family identify itself to the human you?
So this again, we go back to that point in my life where I just ended this relationship, and then within just a matter of a couple of weeks, I remember laying in bed. It must have been some 2:00 in the morning, and I had asked for this. I think it's important to mention that for me, the experience of it was, I didn't know what I was asking for, but I did ask for it. I asked for myself to be in a greater service and to be, put onto whatever path was next for me. And pretty much that night, I had this channeling experience. And the very first channeling experience that I had, they identified themselves as the Mayan elders. So the Mayan elders, interestingly, I haven't had much communication with them since then, but that's what they told me that they were. And within a couple of days after that was then the Arcturian Council of Light. Only at that time, they didn't tell me they were the Arcturian Council of Light. I think because I was still figuring out my connection, and they tried to keep things very simple. So they just said to me, we're a Council of Light. And that's as much as I got, Yeah. But the information that they gave me, which started off with a series of sacred geometry codes and information about healing, I later learned this is very typical Arcturian. So, and even just looking at the codes, when I look back on them now, the geometries that they gave me, I'm like, this is stock standard Arcturian. So it was the Arcturian Council of Light, but at the time, all I got told was we're a Council of Light.
Yeah, beautiful. I know that there are people listening online that are relating to your story. I'm thinking particularly of one. And what were you doing before this happened? You said that you were going down a career path. What did you think you wanted to be in life that changed?
Well, yeah, so I studied engineering as my first degree.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I decided to do my master's in teaching, because I realized sort of partway through engineering, okay, this isn't really fulfilling me. It's not really what I want to be doing. I did get a job tutoring at the university. So I was in a teaching space, and I realized I really liked that. So I actually then got my master's of teaching. I was 3/4 of my way through the master's degree when all of this shifted in my life. So at that point, I did drop out of uni. I went back and finished it a year later, but I just needed a bit of space from all of that. So in between the stages of finishing the degree and then going through all of this, that's when I started my business. So I made this sort of transition where I was teaching at the time at a daycare center. I did that part-time, and then I opened up my business. And then a couple of years later, I sort of transitioned out of all of that and then went into the mentoring side of things.
Ah, beautiful. And I just want to remind people that you're listening to Karen Swain on Accentuate the Positive Media Expanding Consciousness. And we are on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM, streaming out of New Orleans. We're streaming all over the place. We're reaching some a good crowd, actually. There's lots of lovely people online saying hello. but we're all over the US and Canada through syndicated radio. We're even on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and X. And alrighty, so what did they say to you? I always believe that what we were doing before dovetails with who we are as spiritual mentors, teachers, guides. So the engineering part, has that come into it? Like, have they given you any downloads into like anti-gravitic technology or some sort of engineering technology from other civilizations? Has that come into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, again, another question that I've asked many times, because there were moments where I thought, geez, why did I spend 5 years studying engineering and now I'm teaching meditation? It didn't always make sense to me, But yeah, actually, when I was in Uluru in, I think it was 2016 or 2015 thereabouts, I went on a trip with my family to Uluru, and when I was there, I had a really powerful connection with the Pleiadians. And one of the questions that I asked the Pleiadians was why did I study engineering? And they said to me back then, Eesha, one day you're going to merge your knowledge of science with everything that we're sharing with you about these crafts and these technologies and your spiritual practice, and it's all going to come together. So in those very early stages, all I had been taught at that point was just a little bit about healing, the activation of the DNA. DNA activation was the first set of codes that I was given from the Arcturians, and they got me to do it on myself and then got me to share it with others. And later on down the track, it unfolded that this was all connected to the unfolding of dimensions. So when I discovered that, okay, there's 13 dimensions in the universe and they all have different frequencies, I started to piece together the knowledge that I had from engineering and the knowledge that I was getting from the galactic beings, and just getting this sense that, okay, I can see how these two worlds might meet together at some point down the track.
Fabulous. Yeah. Sorry, I was just sharing on X. I was listening. Yeah. And what else have they said to you? Like, what other messages have the Galactics given to you about disclosure and where we're going and what's happening?
So one of the biggest shifts that happened in the disclosure timeline was at the onset of COVID. And that's really where for me personally, my role changed quite dramatically. In my mid-20s, I was more in the healing space, and I spent a lot of time studying with the Arcturians, learning about healing technologies, light bed technologies, frequency tools, a lot of those things, particularly around sacred geometries as well, because that's something the Arcturians work with a lot. So when I got trained in a lot of these different processes, they showed me that, these are the different alternative ways that you can heal. And they also gave me a philosophy for healing, which back then I then incorporated into a modality that I taught called origin activation. When COVID happened, I got this immediate message to just watch the timelines, and they said that we're going to be shifting your role. So around that time, so we're talking early 2020, is when they started to tell me that you're not going to continue doing this healing work forever. You're going to start winding this stuff up. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. But I didn't know what was going to happen next. Hi, I can see some comments there coming through. Nice that you're watching. And so what happened then was they said, look, in the disclosure timeline, if we didn't have COVID, what would have happened is we would have continued on the timeline that we were already on. And it was a great timeline. Things were ticking along the way that they were supposed to be. But when COVID happened, the disclosure timeline got accelerated. So when the disclosure timeline got accelerated, what happened was they said to me, okay, you need to step into the disclosure space, because now disclosure is going to go hand in hand with the ascension in a much more deeper, I guess, more intricate way than what it was before. For anyone who's been in the space since, before COVID, yes, there was disclosure and yes, there was ascension, and the two worlds didn't always marry up. In fact, in a lot of communities, they were kept very, very separate. So when they said to me, look, Eesha, it's about merging those two worlds together, and this needs to happen a lot faster, they said, now you can start telling people that you're a galactic ambassador. And what that means is you're going to be between these two worlds, where you're going to be talking to the ufology people, you're going to be talking to the ascension spirituality people, and you're going to find where those two worlds marry. And so that's actually one of the things that then led to the birthing of my podcast, First Contact, which is somewhere in between ufology, spirituality, ascension, awakening, and channeling. It's a mix of all of that. And that's what the Galactic being said was going to become a really important part about going forward in the new timeline, where if we want to rise above the narrative that's happening with COVID and the vaccines and all of that fear agenda, the disclosure community and the spiritual community, they need to come together and work together for the common good of bringing this awakening and open contact experience into fruition.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who's been doing this for a long time, that's exactly what I've seen over the last few years. I mean, that Tic Tac video came out in 2017, but there was a little bit of noise about it, like, oh, look at that, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of noise in the mainstream mind about we are not alone, which is interesting because I've got two galactic brothers who are not awake. They're not awake. They think I'm crazy, but they're also very galactic, completely obsessed, both of them, with sci-fi. Absolutely. And I asked them, you know, do you believe in ETs and aliens and all that sort of mainstream words? And they said, oh yeah, I believe, but I don't believe that they could be here on Earth, because they're thinking, one who's the science-minded one, he's thinking that, you know, to get here we'd have to use the propulsion systems that we use, the technology that we use, and it would be impossible to get here, but not seeing outside the sort of human box. But now that's changing, Eesha. I'm seeing people talking about anti-gravitic technology being a reality in that sort of news nation, like mainstream conversations on the news, not just on sort of spiritual ET type podcasts. Susan says, yes, the pandemic, my healing and guides have gone galactic and cosmic. Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel wanted to see some of your codes. Have you got any of the codes available to show us on your computer?
I don't know that I'd have them on hand. Actually, I've got one here. Let me see if I can do a screen share.
You know how to screen share on StreamYard?
I'm sure I can figure it out very quickly.
You go down to present. You go down to present and click the present.
Right, thank you. Share screen.
Yeah, but you're right. The pandemic, I mean, there's a lot of people screaming about what happened, and it was atrocious what happened during the pandemic or during COVID or during those intense couple of years. But a lot of amazing things, like the world shifted in such a profound way. And a lot of people had spiritual awakening. And I'm getting emails from people saying, you know, I've just woken up last year. And they're into this conversation. Usually when you wake up spiritually, it takes you a couple of, okay, I'm going to add this to the stage, a few years to sort of acclimate to this type of conversation. That's beautiful. What's that?
So this one here is actually not an Arcturian code. This is one of the ones I was given a little bit later on down the track. This is a DNA activation code that's to activate the third strand of DNA. And I just want to nuance this a little bit. So they've shared a lot of information about me when it comes to DNA codes. And so we have a double helix DNA. Yes. This one activates the third helix, which is separate to when people talk about the activation of the 12 strands, which is what I've also done with some of my other codes. You've got the 12 strands of DNA, of which we have 2 of them active, and then you've got the what they call junk DNA, which are actually light codes, right? So you can activate those. This is actually to activate that triple helix in the DNA. So it's a very specific coding, this one. And yeah, I mean, you can just feel the energy of it. This was given to me back in, must have been around 2018, I think, because there was a series of Trinity activations that we did around that time. So I was guided to go to Melbourne on the 11, was it 11/11? No, this one was not 11. I think this one was for a 3/3 gateway. So it would have been in March. And I facilitated an activation ceremony, and they gave me 4 codes to use at that time. This was one of them.
Yeah. So for people listening on audio only on radio, how would you describe this? It's like it's got 3 sections. It looks a bit like how would you describe this?
So I would say imagine a yin yang, and then imagine a third one being added to it. So it's kind of what that feeling of a yin yang energy, but with 3 instead of 2, because we're moving from binary to trinary, which is a really foundational part of our universe. Really, we're actually in a trinary universe. A deeper connection with this, which I'll only briefly mention here. It's connected to the star system Messier 27, which holds really powerful codings for the trinary codings of the galaxy. So there's a lot embedded inside of this code, and there's other codes that go alongside this one. I can share. I've got another one on hand that I can share as well. If you just give me
Yeah,
2
sure.
seconds to bring it up. It's so this one is the threefold flame. I think. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to stop and get the new
Yeah, I
one up.
know. It's
Because I'm not familiar with the StreamYard. I normally use Zoom. So okay, found it. All right, there we go.
got it.
So
Yeah,
this
good idea.
is my version of the threefold flame. Now I have to just say I did actually draw these codes myself, and my Photoshop skills are my my artistic skills are limited. But you can see here that there is a threefold flame here, and this specific coding. Very interesting story with this one. I was on the plane on the way to Melbourne about to run this event, and I had this code all set up on my iPad. And just as I was on the plane, I hadn't printed them yet because I was going to go to the Officeworks over there and get them all printed out and stuff. So I thought, let me just fix it up a little bit. And it just felt a little bit incomplete. And you can see for those listening as well, what I've got the threefold flame, which has the red or sometimes magenta, the blue flame, and then the golden flame of creation in the center. Now, that flame I saw in meditation many years ago, but for this particular event, I was guided to put a lilac crescent moon underneath it. And I had no idea why I was doing that. It's just the guidance that came through. Now, when I got to Melbourne, some interesting things happened around there as well. The venue that I was supposed to do my event in had double booked me, and so I didn't have a venue. Then I had to message my Airbnb people and say, look, are you okay with me running an event there? And the first Airbnb said, actually, no, we're not. Okay, change the Airbnb. Quickly got a new Airbnb a couple of days before getting over there. And when I opened the door and walked into that room, there was a painting on that wall that had this exact lilac crescent moon on it.
Oh, wow. Oh, don't you love that? Don't you love that?
I
The
just
secret.
channeled this whole thing on the plane on the way there and knew it had to be added for this specific activation. So I now use this activation code all the time when I do my Trinity activations, but I know that it was created specifically for that moment in time, for that event in that room, and all the codes are right there. It was phenomenal.
Love those synchro destinies. Deepak Chopra calls them synchro destinies. So it must have been a small event. I mean, it wasn't hundreds of people, because to change a venue right at the last minute and try and get hundreds of people, so it must have been a smaller event.
It was, and that's quite interesting in and of itself, because every other event that I've run in Melbourne has been packed out. Like, I've had to get bigger rooms at the last minute. And for some reason, now we know for what reason, but for some reason, that specific event, we had exactly 6 people attending, plus myself.
There you go. Yeah.
So
yeah.
it was perfect, because it was just enough people to fit into that little Airbnb and go, right, we can do the event here. So
Exactly,
it all just worked out so beautifully. And of course, the number 6 is connected with the Trinity as well. So again, that was in perfect harmonic alignment with the activation we're about to do.
Perfect. Mish says, g'day from Australia. G'day. Yep. We're streaming from down under today. We're streaming from down under. So, all right. So the guides got you activated in your mid-20s and put you on this path of entrepreneurship, and told you that the events around COVID greatly accelerated the disclosure agenda. What else have they told you about disclosure and where we're going as a collective consciousness? Because although there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people that are on the spiritual consciousness path outside of mainstream religion, we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go. What have they said to you?
So the number one thing they've said to me, and this is even since before COVID or anything like that, they said to me, just keep holding the vision. So I remember sitting with my friend many years ago, just in her house, and we were tuning into the timelines. And back then we felt like the next timeline was meant to be 2020. And we're talking obviously pre-2020. We knew that 2020 was going to be a significant shifter in the unfolding that was to come. Now, a lot of people know the significance of 2012. Now, this was the end of the Mayan calendar. This was supposed to be one of the main dates for the awakening. And of course, that didn't unfold. And there are many reasons for that. 2020 was kind of like the backup option. Then, of course, we all know what happened. The COVID timeline kicked in at the end of 2019, and I knew straight away, I was like, okay, 2020 is not going to be the year that we thought it was going to be. And so what they said to me was focus the vision for 2027. Now, one of the biggest things they've said to me is at the end of the day, timelines change. They can change all the time. But what they say to me is to hold the vision for 2027. And when we proactively take it upon ourselves to hold that vision for 2027, who's creating the timeline? Well, we're creating it. We are the conscious creators of this. So the number one thing they say to me is hold that vision now for 2027. Tell everybody around you to do the same. And if we keep envisioning this peaceful, open contact for 2027, and we gather this collective momentum around the vision, then we create that vision to come to fruition.
Yeah, beautiful. And when we do have peaceful, open contact with our Star Nation neighbours, what do you think planet Earth will look like? How do you think it'll change planet Earth when it's like you put on the news and it's out there in the collective mainstream mind? How do you think it'll change Earth?
I see the most beautiful, beautiful visions of New Earth. And it's like everything has uplifted in frequency. The grass is glowing in this crystalline energy. The sky is this beautiful, beautiful bright blue. We have everything in abundance. Food is in abundance. We are living peaceful lifestyles, which means that one of the big shifts is that we're not eating animals. That's a really big one. We are using technologies that generate with the earth instead of take from the earth. We're in alignment with nature. And even as human beings with ourselves, amongst each other, we are more loving, more peaceful, we're more kind to each other. And of course, at the same time, that's a choice that we can start today. We can start making those choices now to be more self-aware and to have that consciousness so that we start creating that. And one of the biggest things for me is we reunite with our galactic family. Interstellar travel becomes not only possible, but the norm. So I see all of this as we move into the new earth, as we move past our struggles of everyday life, which at the moment, a lot of people are in struggle, they're in suffering. There are children on this planet right now who do not have their basic needs met. Well, in the new earth, none of those things are there anymore. Healing, everyone is healed because we have technologies from the galactics. We have technologies from advanced civilized races, and they show us how we can heal ourselves. We can use frequency. We can use sound energies. We can use light energies to heal everything in our bodies and regenerate ourselves. So when we are healed and we have access to resources, when we are abundant in our basic needs, then we can create a society that is evolved, kind, and conscious and reunited with our galactic family.
Yeah, well, there have been, many hundreds of thousands, as I say, probably millions of starseeds, wanderers, galactic ambassadors that are here on the planet demonstrating just what you're saying. Like they're demonstrating energy healing, they're demonstrating new ways of communication, new ways of education, new ways of they're demonstrating new ways to change every system. But old systems are slow to change. Interestingly enough, you talk about we won't eat animals anymore. One of the main concepts we have as humans is what's in it for me? What's good for me? Never really thinking what's good for the collective. Like you and I are one, like this human family, we are one. What's good for the collective? What's good for planet Earth? What's good? What choices can I make that is good for not only me, but for the animals and the earth and everybody else? It's a concept that humans are slow to take up, I think. And eating is one of those one of those concepts. I have a friend who had two boys, they're in their mid to late 30s now, who were vegetarians when they were little. She comes from Europe, and so meat was very important in her diet. And she couldn't believe she had these two sons that said, we don't want to eat meat. But then one of them has decided, now that he's an adult, no, he wants to eat meat. And somebody else said to me the other day, oh, you know, a lot of my friends who were vegans are starting to eat meat again. And I'm thinking, gee, that's interesting. Because the decision about not eating meat is a decision that's what's good for the collective instead of what's good for me. Like, it's not about my diet, my digestion, and my health. It's about what's good for the collective. I find that choice is very much a collective choice rather than a singular choice. So, yeah, it's slow to change. What do you think can kick us over that hump of thinking only about ourselves and being more collectively orientated, where the choices we make for the whole and not just for the self? What do you think, Eesha?
I think it's a multifaceted approach. And I have a lot of compassion for people who've tried a vegan diet and it hasn't worked for them. And I bounced around it for such a long time. So that's a journey I know very intimately. And I recognize the moments where I've gone back. I've not eaten meat ever because I've always been vegetarian, and that's due to my Indian upbringing. But even just going from vegetarian to vegetarian to vegan, that's been such a journey. And it, for me personally, was just a lack of education. Because the thing is, I did veganism and I did it wrong, and it made me really unhealthy, and I ate too many carbs and I put on a lot of weight, and my digestion was really bad and I was fatigued. And so I understand really deeply that without the right education, the right tools, the right support, you can do a lot of choices badly, even ones good for the collective. And then what happens is you're faced with the decision, well, do I sacrifice myself? Do I sacrifice my health for the greater good, or do I come back to me? And then there's this philosophy, it's like, put your own mask on first. You got to put your own mask on first before you can do anything for the greater good. And so that's been my journey, where I've had to go, okay, how can I be in a state of alignment with these new choices in a way that me is also not getting sacrificed? Because this idea of martyrdom or sacrificing oneself, that runs really strong in spiritual communities as well, and that's something that I say to people.
It can, but there is a law that says we are one. So what's good for the other is good for the self. What's good for the self is good for the other. So there's no sacrifice inside that law. When you're making powerful choices based on decisions made from higher self rather than ego self, then it's good for everybody. It's good for you. It's good for them. It's good for the planet. It's good for the cosmos. But it's tapping into that higher wisdom and not listening to the emotional looping that we go through as humans.
Yes. And that's exactly the journey that I had to go through to bring those two aspects into alignment, where divine will and personal will actually move together. And that in itself is it's been a journey for me. It really has. I wish I could say I just woke up one day and did it, but I really didn't. It's been such a process to really look at, what do I want, what's good for the collective. And even though I knew it intellectually, to really step into that in an embodied way, it wasn't until the Lionsgate last year that I, at a personal level, received a really high vibrational transmission that happened for me in a dream state, where I felt that level of kindness. And it was the vibrational shift internally that then brought my personal will and the divine will into a singular movement as one, rather than being from separation. So I understand the journey that people go through with this. And the only thing I can say to them is, even if you're not experiencing that unification yet, keep holding that vision, keep moving. And also, at a practical level, get yourself educated, because that's what I had to do. I had to hire a nutritionist. I was lucky enough to meet a vegan chef who showed me some really cool things. So there are things that I've had to do on my end practically as well, to be able to move forward in that new vibrational element as well.
I've got to say, there are some fabulous vegan chefs on Instagram. I mean,
Yes.
because of the algorithms, if you look at one thing, then Instagram shows you a million others.
Yes.
But if you're into food and veganism, there are some amazing recipes. They're delicious. They look beautiful. It's a whole new education system. There is a vegan market that happens here in Sydney, which was knocked out by COVID. But for the most part, I think it might be back. But when you go there, they're selling cakes and ice creams and hamburgers and it all looks delicious, but none of it is particularly healthy. It's all vegan, so nothing is meat. I have to say, I was amazed they were selling these mushroom leathers and stuff. I thought that was amazing. There's some incredible technology out there using plant-based stuff where we can make hemp. A friend of mine is working with hemp, and you can use hemp to make horseshoes, which is incredible. It can be that strong. So yeah, there's some incredible technologies out there that can be expanded for, we can use instead of using the old ways, because growing hemp is just so much more eco-friendly than it takes much less water and much less space. And anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff out there. Well, a lot of people I speak to on the show talk about, a cataclysm sort of hitting Earth to change everything. Because as we've discussed, humans are slow to change, and we kind of dig our heels in, and we like the old ways, and we don't want a new way. And a lot of people say that we're going to shake you to wake you. There's going to be a big cataclysm in order to sort of get our heads out of the sand. What do your guides say to you about that?
They have told me consistently for the last 10 years or so that there is another way to do this, but it's up to us to choose that. Now, my personal awakening was cataclysmic. It was actually really difficult. And I always say to people, I wish you don't have to go through it the way that I did it. And yes, you can say, okay, well, I learned the lessons and did all of that. But when I really look back on it, if the collective consciousness had been at a different level, I could have done it much more smoothly. And many of my clients have experienced this as well, because when they've made different choices, and for those that have chosen to take on my wisdom and listen to it and maybe make different choices for themselves, they haven't gone through the same level of heartache that I went through. So I've been fortunate enough to see the pathway that I went through, the pathway that I've been able to help others go through. And of course, everybody's unique pathway is their own, and I can't control or change anything for anyone else. What I can do is encourage people to seek a different vision, or to place their awareness into these different higher frequencies where there is a pathway for a really peaceful, open contact and awakening. And it comes down to personal choice and how willing we are to look within ourselves to shift our own internal cataclysms within, because that's what it comes down to. If we heal ourselves from within and we open our hearts, then there is a pathway where others don't have to go through it the same way that some people did. So it's always a choice, right?
So why did you say that your awakening was cataclysmic? Because I won't put words in your mouth. Why did you think it was cataclysmic?
Well, it was very difficult for me. I mean, when I went through it, I didn't have sunshine and roses. First of all, I was coming out of a relationship, so that in itself had its challenges. And then the second thing, when I did eventually connect with my star family, because it was so out of the box for me, there was so much self-doubt that I had to work through. There was so much difficulty. I didn't know how to talk to people about it. I didn't know how to tell my family. I didn't have certain levels of support that would have been lovely to have had. I didn't have a mentor to guide me through some of the aspects that I went through. So that for me, I really felt like I was kind of navigating in the dark a little bit, and it was challenging, because having gone through 25 odd years of my regular human life, studying engineering, having the scientific background, and then doing the teaching degree, and then suddenly realizing, my God, there's this whole world, on the one hand, it was really exciting, but on the other hand, it was a very difficult thing for me to come to terms with. Add to that the fact that I was, coming out of the relationship, and I was crying all the time, and I thought my life had fallen apart. I can look back on it now and I can smile at it, but as I was going through it, it was actually very difficult.
Well, you come from an Indian background. Were you born in Australia or were you born in India?
I was born in India.
You were born in India. And how old were you when you moved out to Australia, when your family moved out?
So we left India when I was 5. I also lived in New Zealand for a few years, and then I was 9 years old when I came to Australia.
Whereabouts in India were you born?
Bombay, or Mumbai as it's now called.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. And yeah, so how did your family cope with your galactic awakening and you telling them that you're a galactic ambassador here on Earth, here to change the planet? Did they like open arms and say, yeah, that's great?
No, I don't think I told them for a long time, actually. So it was a very slow kind of process of telling my family about it, because I mean, you know, my mum's Hindu, my dad's Muslim. The galactic stuff is way too far-fetched, you know, way too far-fetched. I mean, on the one hand, I grew up religiously very open-minded because of the Hindu Muslim background from my parents, and then also going to Catholic school when I was younger. And then when I was 19, I explored the Baha'i faith and I went on Baha'i pilgrimage. So religiously, you know, I did have that open-mindedness and that very diverse background. But when it came to new age spiritual stuff, that was a whole other ballgame. So, you know, on the one hand, I have to say my parents were supportive to the extent that they knew. But for the first couple of years, all I really told them was I teach meditation. So none of the galactic
Yeah.
stuff, I didn't mention anything because where do you even begin with that, you know?
Yeah. I think of all the mainstream religions, Hinduism, I'm not sure about Muslim, but Hinduism is the most galactic. You know, they have all these elephant head, monkey head gods, you know, all these galactic ambassadors and you know, like Krishna is blue.
Yeah.
And so that they should
But
be.
they're also the perception of that, and it's interesting you mentioned that because yeah, there's a lot of actually connections between the Hindu deities and the galactic beings, which I now know, and it's quite funny to look back on. But at the time, you know, because I grew up in that, the galactic perception actually really wasn't there in Hinduism, because they
No.
don't see them as galactic beings, they see them as avatars on Earth. And so
Right.
I never was ever told anything about the galactic side of it from Hinduism at all.
Yeah, yeah. But have you asked your mob, your galactic mob, about you know, who are these Hindu gods? Like Krishna was
Oh,
blue.
yeah.
Which kind, and what did they say to you about like the elephant, like Ganesh and
Who some
sorry,
of
go
them
on.
are. Yeah, they've told
Sorry.
me who some of them are.
Yeah, tell
So
us about that.
they've said to me that some of the beings are actually a lot of the Hindu deities, especially all the blue ones. That's the representation of that, because the beings are galactic. So I have personal connections which I've sort of gone down into, and this is probably a much longer story than what I'm giving it here. But one of my soul aspects is connected with Krishna. And so that comes through the Ashtar lineage, the galactic lineage. And so when they showed me that, I thought, oh, that's really interesting, that it's actually the same soul beings coming through. But when they come to Earth, they appear with these blue faces because they actually are galactic. So I know that now, but in Hinduism, the way that I was taught it, I was never told that.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend, a young channel who's been channeling. Krishna was her first contact. She was in the corporate world in Sydney making, you know, she climbed the corporate ladder. She got her job that she'd been reaching for. She was earning the big bucks, living in a high-rise apartment overlooking the harbour. You know, life was sweet. And then her partner got sick and she had this little thought, maybe if I meditate, I will be able to help my partner better I might be able to, you know, do some healing on her. And as soon as she started meditating, she started channeling Krishna. And she's
Wow.
she's channeled quite a few books through Krishna, Courtney Beck. And yeah, so Krishna was her first contact. And then after Krishna, like Krishna was her big daddy contact, she got connected to a whole universe of, yeah, teachers throughout the cosmos. So it's interesting, isn't it, that the Hindus have all these amazing deities and gods, and they don't put the galactic piece together.
Maybe they do. It's just that because when I've looked into it a bit more deeply, it's actually it's there through the writings even, you know, you can kind of sense that
It
okay,
is.
this is being said. But I think just, speaking from my personal experience going along to the temples with my mom, I think I just never went that deep into it. It wasn't until Krishna connected with me directly. So I now have direct connections with Krishna, Vishnu, Lakshmi. Actually, one of the days that I first connected with Lakshmi, the next day, $10,000 appeared in my account, So I've had really wild sort of experiences like that where I go, oh, wow, I can feel and see the energy of how this comes in, and why in Hinduism they worship the deities, because they do embody those energies. Lakshmi does very much embody abundance, and Krishna as well. Krishna came to me through a connection with a local a person here in Australia. He came to my studio that I had back then, and he actually wanted to hire the space for an event. He never ended up hiring the space at that time. They did maybe years down the track. But at that moment, he just came to my studio, and because he was so embodied in the Krishna energies himself, just by spending an hour talking to him, I went home that night and Krishna appeared to me in my dreams. And it was one of the most powerful contact experiences I've ever had, because it was so vivid. It was so tangible. It was like I was experiencing it in real life. And in that dream, Krishna, in all his blue everythingness and his flute and everything, came into my vision, and he bent down at my feet. Now, if you're not familiar with Indian culture, this is extremely sacred and significant. When I go home to India and if I'm with my grandparents, I will bend down at the feet of my grandparents or any elder as a sign of respect. And
Nice.
Krishna in my dream came to me. He bent down at my feet. And I remember saying, no, 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 what are you doing? And he said to me, the reason why we worship the deities in external form is because every time we go to the temple and we pray to a deity, we are worshiping the divinity in ourselves. And he bent down at my feet and he looked me in the eye and he said, I am you and you are me and we are divine. And I got that transmission so deeply to this day. I just get goosebumps every time I tell this story, because he showed me in that moment the true meaning of devotion, and where that Hindu concept of being devoted and praying to all these different deities, where it comes from and what it means.
Yeah, that's just so important. In every religion, we're praying to a God that we perceive to be outside of ourselves. In
Exactly.
Christianity, it's the Jesus and the Buddha and the deities. I know that Hindus are very passionate about their religion and their devotion, and even in Bali, Bali is predominantly a Hindu. Have you been to Bali? You've been to Bali? Because it's like
Bali.
up the road for you, like around the corner for you in Perth. Yeah, and they're like every day they're putting out these devotional offerings every day. But that concept that you're offering to yourself, to the higher aspect of yourself or your own divinity, it does get lost in mainstream religion. It's so important that we understand devotion is about devotion to the aspect of us that is divine, that's here to be a part of the collective. Yeah, we are all divine. Absolutely, Susan. Yeah, such a beautiful message. And I want to remind people that you're listening to Accentuate the Positive Media with Karen Swain, expanding consciousness on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. My guest today is Eesha Patel. She's in Perth, on the other side of the country in Australia. And we're streaming on 107.7 and 105.3. We are talking about our galactic brothers and sisters. So you said that you prayed to, or that you had a contact experience with Lakshmi, and then you found $10,000 in your bank account the next day. Like, did it make sense where the money came from, or was it completely mysterious?
No. It came through like a client suddenly purchased something and someone else deposited money for something. I can't remember exactly now where it all came from, but it was like through sales in the business or like other things. But at that point, my business was not doing that kind of money. So for me, it was really like, it was a lot, at that point.
And for people that don't know who Lakshmi is, what does she represent in Indian culture and Indian Hindu, sorry, in Indian culture, Hindu religion?
Yeah, we pray to Lakshmi as the goddess of abundance, prosperity. So usually around Diwali, you'll find a lot of people praying to Lakshmi because she brings in good wishes, prosperity into the home.
Yeah, beautiful. And have you discussed your galactic wisdom around the Hindu religion with your parents,
I
or
don't
with
think
it?
we've explicitly talked about it, but I mean, they do watch my interviews from time to time, so
Do they?
I'm sure. Yeah, they're actually very supportive. I mean, at the start, I was a bit hesitant to tell them, but then eventually they started coming along to my stuff, and in fact, some of the stuff that comes on the media, like the news articles and that, my mum will be the first to send it to me before I've even seen it. So they might not fully know, but even these travels and that I go on, my dad will ask me, "Oh, so did you see a UFO while you were away?" Or so we have those sorts of conversations. So they're definitely open to it in that sense. But everyone's on their own journey as well at the level of awareness they have around it.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I mean, talking to galactic ambassadors across the planet, everyone's saying that we're having this awakening and that everyone will have an awakening to this understanding and knowing. And then there are others that say, like you, well, everyone's on their own journey. They don't have to believe in this stuff. So what is it? Do we have to believe in this stuff to understand disclosure? Like you say, we're going to have clear, peaceful, open contact in 2027. Like, is it imperative that people wake up, or we just let people stay asleep? Like, what's the story?
I think that's a really excellent question. And I'm always in the bucket of let's awaken everyone, let's do the thing. But one of the big things that I've learned is you cannot force someone to awaken. And acceptance has been such a big part of my journey. And even reconciling within me that energy of, oh, they have to awaken because we need them to complete the mission, or that sense of urgency around that. I've had to release that and really surrender into the divine plan. So I am here to awaken anybody who wants to awaken, who's ready to awaken. I will keep sharing my message day in, day out for the hearts and the ears that are ready to listen. And also, there is a space of love and acceptance for everybody's individual journey, because God does have a plan. There is a divine plan in all of this. So the best that I can do is to do my bit. I can get on shows like this. I can do my work. I can do my courses and whatever else that I get guided to do. I can put all of that out in the world, but it's up to each person to receive that on their own. And also, we are being so supported by all these frequencies coming in, these galactic energies, these solar energies coming in. So people are going to awaken. And when they do, and when they're ready to hear it, I'll be there to share my message again and again and again and again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Hollywood has depicted that, when ET makes themselves known to planet Earth, that people go mad, especially very religious people, that they kind of go crazy and they start, I don't know, looting shops and just going crazy. But I don't see that happening. In fact, even the Vatican came out and said something about they acknowledge the ET phenomena. And so who are the Catholics? They're talking to billions of people. Yeah, I wonder when ET becomes a common understanding in the mainstream mind. I did ask you this question before, how it will affect humanity. Will people kind of go crazy because their paradigm has shifted so dramatically, or will they all suddenly awaken and go, of course, or will they say, yeah, I always believed in ET, even though yesterday they'll say you're crazy and then the next day they'll say, I never said that. What do you reckon will happen in the mainstream mind?
So one thing I really want to share on this is that Star Family are very, very mindful to do it at the pace that it's going to be peaceful, even if it means taking longer to do it. Because even though we're holding the vision for 2027, and I'm telling everyone, hold the vision, hold the vision, hold the vision, the reason why it has been delayed from 2012 to 2020 to now 27 is because in 2020, if that disclosure event had happened, the human consciousness wouldn't have been ready for it, and it would have been chaotic. And can you imagine having 8 billion people on the planet going into fear and what that creates in the multiverse? I don't even want to imagine it. I'm going to just remove that out of the mind completely. because the vision that we are holding is the peaceful awakening. And so there is a divine plan. And I always say this, someone out there knows what's going on, and it's God, and actually many of the galactic beings who view the timelines, for example, the Great Brotherhood of White Light, Order of Melchizedek, who are overseeing the divine order and the way that this unfolds. They've showed me many times that this will happen in the timing that it can happen peacefully. And that's really important to them, that it does happen that way, because we want a loving transition into that higher frequency.
Yeah. Yeah. You said many people go into fear. I think we've had a bit of a dress rehearsal, because when they rolled out a narrative in 2020, which was a fearful narrative, and it was a global narrative, which was really interesting. Like the whole world was affected. How did humanity handle that? How much fear was created during that? So we've had a little bit of a dress rehearsal on how to handle our own fear, like when something profoundly unusual happens on a global scale. In many ways, we can see that whole couple of years, 2020, 21, 22, 23, even 24, as a dress rehearsal for what's happening through disclosure, when the whole world wakes up to how we're being communicated and helped through our Star Nation families. Yeah. It's fascinating. I can't wait for it to happen, to tell you the truth, Eesha. I think it'll be really interesting to see how humanity does handle it. I mean, it is rolling out through our mainstream media systems, through news and stuff like that. But for the most part, people ignore it because it's not something that is personal to them or they're interested in. That has no value to them. It's like, that doesn't mean anything in my life. Does that help me make money? Does that help me? Carol says, I can't either. You can't wait, Carol. Because we're also self-focused. It's like, how is this going to affect my life? It doesn't interest me because it's not like what I'm into. That's what people say. But it will affect, as you said, it will affect everyone's life, because with their disclosure, they bring with them technology that will change planet Earth in every system, and consciousness, like the expansion of consciousness. So it will affect everyone. What do you say?
And the mainstream media actually plays a really big role in this. And they've showed me this. The role of the media in the next couple of years is going to amplify dramatically, because the media plays such a powerful tool in disseminating information. Even just thinking about this one thing, like, for example, if you watch a movie, say, take Avatar. I love the movie Avatar. It's so beautiful. And it's really been challenging. If you have millions and millions of people watching that film, their consciousness is in that, right? So what the galactic beings have shared with me is that to focus my attention onto media in the coming years, and I haven't really had to do it in any sort of overly conscious way at this point, just in the regard that it's been coming around me. They've just said to me, watch what comes into you. Suddenly I'm just, my world is surrounded by producers and directors, and I don't know the first thing about making a film, other than like when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress. I thought that'd be really cool, so I did drama classes, I thought it was fun. But it's in my field right now. And so what they've shared with me, the importance of media, they've said, just start building these connections with people. And they've put these people in my field, saying that when the timing is right, I'll be able to go into a project that's really big, that's going to influence a lot of people. And I'll be able to bring the galactic message and the frequency through that, because when all the people watch it and place their awareness on that, we can literally watch our way into the frequency just by focusing our energy into that. So the media plays a really, really important role in coming years with all of this.
The media plays a huge role in all of this. The media always has. The media has been a collective hypnotic tool to the collective mind. But what's happened in the last few years, especially, it's been rolling out probably since the internet started, but more strongly in the last 10, and even more exponentially in the last 5 years, or even since COVID, is that the media stations that are getting the most views are not the mainstream news channels. They're the Joe Rogans and the Sean Ryans, and they're just getting just like, you know, the Next Level Soul. Alex Ferrari started his podcast show on spirituality and near-death experience, and now he's going into the Galactic conversation. Jeff Reynolds with Jeff Mara podcast, and they're just getting millions and millions and millions of views. Joe Rogan, I think, show, he talks about UFOs a lot, ancient history a lot. He brings in all these conversations. I'm giving all these plugs. There's another show on YouTube called The Why Files. He's got nearly 4 million followers. He's getting a couple of million views per episode. Yeah, it's just, that's where the media is now. I mean, the news people that are pumping out more fear-based rhetoric are getting a tiny percentage of the following that these other media outlets are getting. Like, that is amazing that that's happening. Yeah, it's fantastic. Even this show is getting hundreds of thousands of views. Yeah, it's true. Right, Carol? Yeah. So I was about to go off media this year because the algorithms on, you know, the platforms were killing me. And then when I went on syndicated radio, people are tuning in. Yeah, it's amazing what's happening.
I think people want the truth. They want to know what's going on out there, you know?
Absolutely.
And in terms of the mainstream, so one of the things that the Galactic beings guided me to do last year was just the way it unfolded was so funny, but they got me on The Project, which, for those of you not in Australia, it's one of our biggest primetime television shows. So they had me doing a Galactic contact experience on The Project. So
cool.
I took the host out. There's a whole backstory to how this unfolded and how I ended up leading it. You know, it just happened the way that it happened. But the short version of the story is that they got me to go to Melbourne and to do this experience, and all the energies that got anchored in, and there was a lot of backlash actually from specific ufology communities in the area who didn't want me doing it, because the project is typically more like a humorous comedy, lighthearted kind of show, you know. So a lot of people want me to be there, and I just said to them, you know what, like, this needs to have a lightheartedness to it. If you can't go in there and just bring it into this normality and have normal conversations about it that are light and friendly, then people aren't going to understand it. You can't be serious about this all the time. And I get there's a seriousness to it. I get there's a respect to it. I've been in the contact space for a long time. Anyway, so they got me in on The Project to do this really lighthearted, funny segment about UFOs. And it was great because all the frequencies got through there in this beautiful high vibing way. And the energies that we anchored in that specific moment, I saw how it influenced in very subtle ways in the months to come. And I thought, that's it. That's the key, you know? So there is a space for the alternative, what you talked about, the Joe Rogans and the Alex Ferraris and all of that, and the mainstream. You know, I think at some point they will marry together, and the topics that are currently getting all the views on the alternative mainstream are going to have to become mainstream because that's where the attention's at.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've seen that on Sydney. I don't listen to Sydney mainstream radio, but somebody sent me a show that one of the biggest radio stations here that everyone tunes into when they're in their cars, you know, in the morning. I can't think of their names. They're on television. You'll know who I'm talking about. But anyway, Australian, they're having conversations they're talking about near-death experiences. They're talking about UFO. They sent me this show because normally they talk about, you know, gossip and Hollywood and just unbelievable.
Well, Hollywood. Hollywood is talking about UFOs, I can tell you that. When I went to Contact in the desert, I met Hollywood producers there, and we're having conversations about Contact. So Hollywood is actually on board with the whole phenomena, which is amazing.
Well, Hollywood has always been on board with this phenomenon. I mean, there are some amazing movies out there. Look at Spielberg's movies. But for the most part, mind you, I'm thinking of that one where he's making the tower out of the mashed potato. What's that one? Contact. Is it called Contact? Like the most famous E.T., not E.T. made by Spielberg, but the other one where people are having
close encounters.
Close encounters. Thank you. Yeah. But for the most part, Hollywood presents the phenomena as an evil phenomena. That's what, like, go through a streaming platform and look at sci-fi, and it's like Earth has been destroyed and there's this apocalyptic event and people trying to survive. This is where sci-fi goes. Or there's an evil alien threat. It's just 90% of the movies are the evil alien threat. Even that movie that Signs, you know that movie Signs that Australian actor is in, who Braveheart actor, what's his name? Me and Hollywood Joe's Mel Gibson was in, and it has the crop circles. Like it was amazing footage of crop circles, but they created these aliens that were coming to like kill us, the evil alien agenda. Always Hollywood does that. So Hollywood has been obsessed with ET for
changing.
decades.
That's actually changing.
Hopefully.
I can tell you firsthand experience that that's changing, and that excites me a lot, because that's where I want to be in the next couple of years, is going, right,
Yeah.
how do we bring that positive and real influence, not the, you know, sci-fi made up stuff, but how do we bring the realistic galactic influence into film, into media? Because that is a big part of the awakening, is to for the people who aren't quite there yet, if they see it and they focus on it through the media, then, as you said, it's a very powerful tool. It can really awaken and shift things quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm seeing that change too. I'm hoping that it changes as well. But yeah, I mean, the agenda, the more scared you are, the more ticket sales, you know, you're going to sell on your movies. But I've often visualized, like, wouldn't it be amazing to see a movie where ET comes down in all its forms, both humanoid and other forms, like insectoids and greys and all sorts, but they share their technology with humanity. Imagine making a movie about that, and showing how it's going to greatly affect our society, and what are the benefits of us being connected. I mean, I guess Star Trek was the first one to even go there, because a lot of the Star Trek movies, well, in the old days, I don't know about now, were more positive than negative in the galactic connection. I mean, all the people on the ships, like Mr. Spock, he's an ET, and they're all ETs on the ship. But yeah, it would be great to see a movie like that. What are the Hollywood producers saying? Are they got movies like that in the pipeline, Eesha?
Not that I know of that's in the pipeline, but I know that I'm having conversations about creating it in the pipeline. So some of the people that I've met recently also, just on these travels, like I said, like these people have just come into my field. Like suddenly I'm talking to people working at Netflix. I'm talking to people who are in Hollywood. I'm talking to producers, you know. So I know that for me personally, I am having those conversations as we speak.
Yeah. And with your work, are you seeing more of these connections with overseas, or what's happening in the disclosure space in Perth, in Australia? Is it happening over there, or are you still sort of hidden?
Well, in Perth, I mean, if anyone was going to run stuff in Perth, it would probably be me, and I'm not doing much in Perth right now. But I do find that there's more of an uptake with this sort of stuff in the US and also in Europe. I find that Australia, there's definitely a lot of activity when it comes to here in the Perth Hills and even in Mandurah. There's a lot of stuff going on, even Yanchep up north. There's a lot of activity, but as far as disclosure, organized events go, there's not too much going on. I mean, I think there's a CE5 group here, but they're not very active. So there's not a lot on the ground happening in Perth at the moment. And that's probably why I end up getting on planes and going to the US, where all these big events and big conferences are happening. I think it's time to maybe change that. But as you probably know, Karen, as well, it's a lot of organization to put these events on yourself. So it is what it is for the moment.
It is. And I think that when you put on a big event, like you can have small events. I've been doing small events for like 25, 30 years where we're a dozen people, you know, talking about this stuff. But if you're putting on events where hundreds are coming, or even thousands, there's a guy putting on an event in Sydney at the Hordern Pavilion, which is a massive space here. There's been a few spiritual events in the Hordern Pavilion, but mostly like psychic events. And his event is about the afterlife. So the mainstream mind is ready for those types of conversation, like what happens when you die, and psychic ability, and can I get a reading, and can I speak to my loved ones? That's very wanted, I feel. But speaking to aliens or ETs, not so much. But yeah, as you say, Eesha, that is being married. Like if you're speaking to your dead loved ones, like you're speaking to the cosmos, right? You're speaking to your multidimensional aspect, where you can connect with other Star Nation consciousnesses and bring through channeling or information from other worlds that can greatly affect this world and how we operate here on planet Earth. But yeah, there's a big event happening in Sydney in September at the Horden, which houses 5,000 people. I'm going to be really interested to see how he gets the numbers in, but about the afterlife, specifically about the afterlife. But yeah, I have that dream, Eesha, of seeing a big event like that, talking about galactic ambassadors.
There is one in Australia, the Cosmic Consciousness. That's in December, so I am speaking at that event. That's the only big-ish one that I know of. I think we get
there's another one in Queensland. There's a few of them around, but yeah, I know Mick and Catherine, and they started, like Mick started. He had a near-death experience, and he started in Sydney, and he just wanted to find people that could talk about what he experienced, and he started a little gathering and then a conference. Then he met Catherine, who was a hypnotherapist, and she'd taken people back. And so they had these two events, and I've spoken at one of them when they were in Byron Bay. They had the UFO event, and then they had the afterlife event, and then they married them, and they said, no, we're not going to have two events back to back. So like they were thinking people are interested in talking to their dead loved ones, and then people are interested in this other conversation. But then after that event I don't know how many years ago, they married them, and they called it Cosmic Consciousness, and they put it in Uluru. They have it in Uluru. So yeah, it's a bit of a plug for you guys, Mick and Catherine. They're doing great work.
Yeah, I didn't know that backstory. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I only met them in 2019. Oh no, 2020. I spoke at their 2020 event, and they haven't had it in Uluru since then. So yeah, that's cool that you've known them for such a long time and you know the whole backstory of how that came together.
Yeah, Carol says it's all spirituality. It's all spiritual, really. Of course it is. Of course it is. It's all one conversation. And I had Jeff, what was his last name? Anyway, a few weeks ago, talking to the Greys, and he said the Greys are teaching us about enlightenment. And and I said, why are they teaching us about enlightenment? And they said to be a part of the hybrid program, because give us a bit of your DNA and we'll teach you about enlightenment. But most of our galactic brothers and sisters have a level of consciousness that's so far beyond human consciousness, and so they do come to teach us about what we have called through spirituality enlightenment. But Mick and Catherine during COVID moved out of Sydney and they moved to Lord Howe Island, which is a beautiful island. For those people, check it out on a map off the coast of Australia. It's very Jurassic Park looking. It's absolutely beautiful. And then obviously they couldn't have events until we were all allowed to. And the next event they had was at Lord Howe. They had the event at Lord Howe, and then they went back to Uluru. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, we've got 10 minutes to go. Anything pressing you want to share with people about your galactic connections and how it's going to affect their lives?
I'd like to ask you a question, if that's all right. So you mentioned just then about the Greys, right, and the hybrid program. And so I've had conversations around this, so I'd love to get your perspective on this too. So some of the beings will happily give their information for nothing in return. They don't need our DNA. They'll just happily teach us. But there are some beings who are making these sorts of agreements, like we'll give you something in exchange for something. And I'm curious as to why and what your take is on that.
Well, I guess it's just their personal agenda. I mean, most of the people that have these abduction experiences, and like if you know Mary Rodwell, have you spoken to Mary, who's a hypnotherapist? So have always made that soul agreement before they take on a human experience. So they make the agreement with the Greys that I will take on a human experience, which means, I'll come into a human body, which means all that it is to be human. I'll be asleep. I will have the consciousness that the human mind, I'll have the DNA that the humans have. And so I won't remember my consciousness that I have when I'm a Grey or another galactic. So I'll take on that human perspective and I will lend my DNA to the hybrid program. There's always this agreement. It's like they're not taking it from us as so many people like to accentuate the negative and say they're stealing our DNA or whatever. But I think that the way that they have developed their mind and not their body, they want to reverse that a bit by lending some of our DNA to develop a more human body with the grey intelligence and connection and one mind and spirituality. And so that's what they're doing. And I've spoken to a lot of people about the hybrid program. But yeah, you're right. There are like mothers and daddies of the universe that have been overseeing the conscious evolution of humanity since time began. And they're here to oversee us and teach us, no questions. Like, they don't need anything from us. They absolutely don't need anything from us. They're here to enlighten us. So, yeah, there's a few things going on. There is not either or. There's like a lot of different stories going on with this ET connection and human, dovetailing human connection. Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Eesha? What do you think?
Well, the hybrid program isn't one that I've looked into too deeply. I hear about it from a lot of people who know that they're part of it. It hasn't resonated very much for me because I mean, I know my backstory of how I came in and I guess the mission that I came in with. The Arcturians showed me how to activate my DNA during my lifetime. So I didn't have the same level of alteration that people in the hybrid program had, because I think some of them had it when they were in the womb, or like, various ways that it's happened for them, or some of them have been abducted. So I think, I'm sort of on the same page with you. There's just so many different experiences out there, and I find it fascinating listening to other people's perspectives, because some of them I know from personal experience, and others I don't resonate with because it's not true for me, but I like to hear about it from other people so I can learn more and get educated in the space as well.
Well, they tell me that you're part of the hybrid program. Actually, in truth, every human is. The bodies that we're wearing today has been part of a hybrid program, not from the greys so that they can change their physical form, but just through evolution of the physical human body and the physical and our consciousness. But actually, people like you that come in awakened, their parents have been part of a tweaking of DNA, and even before you come, so that they can give you their heightened activated DNA for you to hold the amount of consciousness that you hold. And then you can expand on that through free will, because as humans, we have free will. We can awaken or not. We can say, yes, bring it on, or we can say, nah, go away. But we do have to have a level to have awareness of that we even have a choice. So they say that you're actually a part of the hybrid program, as am I. Actually, you see my mother's parents, and they were these short, fruggly little English people, and they had all these really tall children. And in genetics, that's genetically impossible for short parents to have tall children. And then you look at my mother, she looks completely different to the rest of, I mean, there is a similarity, but her body was definitely tweaked. She was not someone that woke up during her lifetime. She was left wanting. She died at 50, not knowing who she was or why she was here. But she gave that DNA to us, to her 3 children. And as I say, I woke up and my brothers didn't, even though I can see their connections. But I'm hoping they will. They're in their 60s now. Never too late, never too late. But yeah, my older brother, he's in his mid-60s, he was taking apart anything electronic when he was like 8 or 9 or 10 years old, to see how it works. He has this amazing mind of technology, and and completely obsessed with sci-fi, but not awake to who he is as a galactic being. Yeah, it's interesting. We all have a choice. We all have free will. Yeah. But we've got 3 minutes to go, darling. So any last things you'd like to say before?
Lineage plays a big role in some of these things as well, because some of us come. So just remarrying the Hindu aspect of it with the galactic side of things, because my DNA goes Indian from like way back, and so the galactic side of it for me actually comes through there. So it comes through the lineage of that. Because I know what my deity lineage is, and it actually comes through that. And if you understand that the deities and the galactics are the same, in India they're very big on the caste system. Like you have the Lohanas and the Brahmins and like all of that. So yeah, you could say to some extent that that's kind of like the hybrid program because it's coming through that ET DNA from the Indian lineage side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole, I mean, the way that we've evolved into these forms is a whole series of shows. We could talk about that. But I want to thank you for coming on and telling us your story and chatting with us about your galactic contacts. Another Aussie in the galactic world. It's been beautiful. Thanks so much, Eesha.
Yeah, thank you so much. And anyone who wants to connect with me off the show, my website is there, eeshapatel.com. I have a wonderful galactic community. So anyone who wants to learn more about that, just reach out and I'll be happy to share that with you.
And your podcast is called First Contact. When can people find your podcast?
First Contact is available on all major platforms, Spotify, YouTube, or even if you just go to my website, that's EESHAPATEL. You can listen to incredible interviews with world experts.
Fabulous. Thank you again. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. It's been great to see you all in the chat. Thank you. Big love to all of you that stayed. And if you want to join my community, the Inner Sanctum, just go to karenswain.com, pop in your email, and we meet on Zoom once or twice a month and have these chat about these things. And I'd love to meet you on Zoom. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.